Hello everyone. Welcome to the Crystaly Recapped channel. Claire Havel is a young Australian tourist who comes to Berlin to visit the city's landmarks. Staying in a cheap hostel, the girl sits on the roof until morning with a group of young people who, like her, have come to relax. The next day, Claire strolls through the streets of the city, looking at the shops, and even buys herself some small souvenirs. Later, she goes to the library, where she browses through art books used in Berlin. Returning to the hostel, the girl encounters a young man near the traffic light. He calmly speaks English and even offers Claire to taste strawberries. Claire agrees to go home with him, where his father grows these berries. Walking among beautiful houses and gardens, Andy talks about his childhood and how they had fun with his parents in a small and cozy house. Later, he asks Claire about the reasons for her visit to Berlin. Claire explains that she worked as a photographer in a real estate agency, and at some point she wanted something more, so she decided to photograph the architecture of Germany. After spending the day together, the young people go home. Andy suggests meeting again, and of course Claire agrees. Despite her plans to travel to Dresden, she decides to stay. The next evening, the couple spends the night together. In the morning, Andy goes to work. He teaches English at school. After work, his colleagues invite him for a drink, but he refuses, citing a prior engagement. Meanwhile, Claire is forced to stay in the apartment all day because the doors are locked, and Andy didn't leave the keys. The young people go to the club, then get absorbed in their routing activities again. The next morning, Clary asks about the key, and Andy confidently points to the dresser before rushing to work. Lying in bed, Clary begins to slowly explore the apartment. Her attention is drawn to a magazine with artistic works. As she flips through it, she notices a photograph between the pages showing a woman's shoulder with the inscription, "Mine." This inscription somehow alarmed Claire, and she immediately rushed to the mirror. She finds the same inscription on her shoulder. Frightened, she rushes to the door, but the spare key, of course, doesn't fit. The windows are also locked, and her mobile phone doesn't have a SIM card. Claire tries to escape by breaking the window, but she discovers that the windows are double glazed and impossible to break. When Andy returns, he acts as if nothing happened. He hands Claire flowers and suggests cooking dinner together. He simply doesn't answer any of Claire's questions. Enraged, Claire attacks him, and he has to tie her to the bed, calmly stating that nobody will hear her because the apartments in this building are empty. The next day, Andy has lunch with his father, Eric. During the conversation about Claire, he asks about the previous girl his son dated. Andy assures him that Natalie returned to Canada. His father expresses surprise that his son only dates tourists. Returning home, Andy unties Claire so she can take a shower and have dinner. Sitting in the bathtub, the girl notices long blonde hair in the drain and realizes she is not the first victim here. Claire spends the night tied to the bed. In the morning, Andy untees her from the ropes and goes to work. He hides the key in a box with a combination lock, which he keeps outside the apartment above the door. Making sure the guy left, Claire begins her mission. She manages to find a screwdriver, which she immediately hides. In the evening, Andy returns home and finds the girl assembling a puzzle he brought her earlier. She behaves very quietly and restrained, pretending to be very happy about the young man's return. Taking advantage of the moment, Claire inserts the screwdriver into Andy's hand, snatches the keys from him, and quickly runs out of the apartment. However, she naturally fails to leave the inner courtyard because the guy catches up with her. He breaks her fingers and carries her back into the apartment. Several days later, Andy learns about his father's death. Overwhelmed with grief, he spends a week at Eric's house trying to cope with the loss. Snow has already fallen on the streets, and trapped in the apartment, Claire is forced to warm herself only by the fireplace, for which there are almost no more logs. The provisions are also running out, so the girl eats whatever leftovers she could find. Almost completely depleted by hunger and cold, Claire feels relief when Andy finally returns home, even experiencing something akin to gratitude. As she had thought, the young man had abandoned her forever. Learning about Eric's death, Claire comforts Andy, and they find themselves back in the same bed. From that day on, Claire's mood begins to improve. She eagerly takes on household chores, bakes pies, and even learns to play the accordion. On Christmas, sitting in the living room, she quizzes the boy about why he chose her. Andy confesses that she is perfection to him, and he has never felt anything like it before. Later, he presents Claire with a gift, a book and a dog that belonged to his father. Overwhelmed with joy, Claire can't hold back tears, as she now has a true companion. Immediately after Christmas, Andy takes Claire to the forest, planning to kill her. However, he is interrupted by a little boy who approaches the couple and asks for help for his brother, who has injured his leg. While Andy attends to the injured child, Claire whispers to the boy to call for help, but he doesn't understand English. Deciding there are too many witnesses around, Andy takes Claire back. On New Year's Eve, they go to Peter's house, where they work together at the school. When fireworks go off outside, Andy notices that Yana is showing him excessive attention. He takes it as an insult to his friend and immediately informs, who asks him to leave their home immediately. Meanwhile, Claire notices a man in the yard and manages to attract his attention. But Andy kills him. He forces Claire to help him wrap the man in film and then carry him out of the house to burn him. Several weeks later, there are ads in the newspapers about Claire's disappearance. Andy sees this article but pays no attention to it. One evening, he checks the students' work in the kitchen and sees that the girl burnt her hand. While going to get some ointment, he doesn't notice Claire slipping something into the notebook belonging to Franca. In the morning, Andy goes to work, but before that, he cuts off the electricity and water supply in the apartment. He does it to abandon his prisoner in this way. Throughout the day, Andy distributes the students' notebooks with homework. Opening page, Franca sees a photo where Claire is tied up. She remembers seeing this girl in her teacher's apartment. The student asks for permission to leave the class, hops on her bike, and rides to Andy's home. However, Franca didn't notice that the photo fell out when she got up from her desk. Her classmates immediately notice it and start discussing it. Seeing the reason for the students' laughter, Andy realizes that he's been exposed. He gets into his car and drives home. Franca manages to release the captive, and the girls hide together in the empty apartments of the building. Gathering all her courage, Claire manages to lure Andy into the apartment and lock him in. Resigned to his fate, the young man sits in a chair and starts laughing, as he couldn't foresee such an outcome. Meanwhile, Claire takes a taxi and leaves. Driving through the streets of Berlin, she breathes in the air of freedom she has been deprived of for so long. This is the end of the movie. That's all for today. Subscribe and like if you want more videos like this.